Say there, Salem and Kaiser. You're welcome to the second in a series of shows called Our Awesome Authors. We are showcasing people here in our very own community who are aspiring and successful authors and writers of various kinds, various genres, fancy word for us. And today we have Christel Jonge. Christel is a lead member of our library writers group called WYTT, Writers Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. And Christel is a native of Berlin, Germany, and has written quite extensively her memoirs of what it was like growing up in Berlin and other cities nearby during World War II, and then later on the Berlin airlift, and finally the taking down of the Berlin Wall. Welcome aboard, Christel.
Thank you.
Okay. Tell us a little bit first about what life was like when you were growing up in Germany. We saw some pictures of your, it was a sort of like braids and all, you were a cute little girl running around the streets.
That was much later.
That was much later.
That was during the airlift.
Oh, in the beginning, how did it
In the
start out?
beginning, there was the war.
Mhm.
Uh,
Rough days.
yeah, bombs every night and burning houses.
Mm.
Yeah.
Scary.
Very scary.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And everybody brought their own trauma, I guess, from those experiences in a way.
Yes, and I think my generation, we all have PTSD.
Mhm.
It'll never leave you
Collectively.
because we heard it all, we smelled it all, we experienced it all, and it was gruesome. But it was still the most fruitful time of my life because I learned so much. I learned to survive under any circumstance.
That's an important skill to develop.
Yes.
A lot of us still lack that skill here in this country and in other
Yes.
countries too. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't say we're quite pampered, but we have been somewhat protected from the vicissitudes of war up front.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us go back and ask, when did you decide that you wanted to become a writer and put your experiences down on paper?
I have always been writing. I started when I was 5,
Wow.
and I wrote poetry, and I wrote letters to my father, who was in Siberia fighting the war. And I have written a lot in German, especially poetry. So we have this custom in Germany, when somebody's birthday comes around, you not only give a gift, but the gift has to be matched with a poem. So I wrote and wrote and wrote all my life. Then I came to the United States, and I was invited to a writers group. And I said, well, I don't write
Yeah.
in English. And somebody said, why don't you give it a try? And I said, I don't even know what to write about. And a lady said, start with your first memories. And I went home and thought, my first memories?
Yeah.
Burning houses and people jumping out of windows. So I started writing, and I have been writing ever since, and now I've written 3 books.
Wow.
Yeah.
More power to you. More power to you. What was it like with your parents? Did they encourage you in writing? I think you showed the class, the group, that you still have letters, of course, in German,
Yes.
between your father and yourself.
Yes.
And that was real practice. Letter writing is a
Yes.
lost skill.
Yes.
Today everybody texts the young
Yes.
generation.
Yes. When my father died, they found all the letters I had written to him in his safe box. And we have no idea how he got those letters through the war. It's a miracle, but he kept every single one. So I ended up with a stack of letters, which I had to put in order. So my floor was all letters, so I had to date them. And I
Yes.
picked the most impressive ones I put into my book. But I could write 2 more books on these letters.
Yes. And you managed to get a lot of photographs, say, from the 30s and 40s, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's some of them appear in your book.
Yes, they do.
Where could people get your book if they're interested? We'll give them a preview of it in a few minutes.
My book is a private print, and I know a lot of people, and people know about me, and I have no problem getting them my book. And my book is actually priceless in that I don't ask for money, only for a donation to cover the costs, because the costs are quite substantial
They
for
are.
editing, formatting, artwork, and most people give me some money, and that's just fine with me.
So should they write to you? Should they come visit the writers group? What's the
there
best way
is
to contact you?
An email, my email.
Tell the
And-
audience what your email is. So
My
so they know.
email is my full name,
Spell it out,
Christel,
please.
CHRISTELJONGE space, no space, VOS. Okay, do it again.
For Christel.
CHRISTELJONGE VOS@gmail.com. I'm working on creating a website now, but the website
Terrific.
isn't done.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
When did you first start writing this now published book? When was your
6 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
6 lean years.
Yes.
No, I'm quoting from the Bible.
Yeah.
7 lean years, really.
The writers' groups really help because it forces you to produce.
Okay.
It forces you to have something for the next week. But on the other hand, to me, writing is wonderful, but I need hours on my own, no friends, no telephone calls. I only have put the radio on classical music,
Everybody out to lunch.
and I need 3 hours in a row at least.
Yeah, it
to
requires
write.
a concentration.
Yeah.
Okay. Suppose you give us a little excerpt from your book so we can get the coming attractions from Christel.
This is volume 1,
Pathways away from the edge.
from the edge. Coming of Age and Chaos, Berlin, 1939 through 1971.
It's quite a period.
I think it helps to know about the testimonials I got. I just read a few.
Sure.
I was so moved by chapter 1. Its graphic, clear writing, the poignant beginning of your journey story, and the telling photographs. This will be invaluable for your children and children's children. You have found and established your very own voice, your perspective, and your audience for the story so important to tell. You tell it with love, honesty, passion, fluency, and evident ease, with well-chosen specifics and fitting language. And invaluable are the results of your research of pertinent historical facts, photographs which are worth more than 1,000 words.
They're very fine quality.
Then from an editor, I got a nice testimonial. I have just read Christel's gut-wrenching chapter 10. What a fine piece of writing. She shows us much more than tells us how dreadful life was in post-war Berlin. And show, not tell, is one of the major rules of good writing. One of the major things suggested, in my opinion, is how ordinary citizens suffer when others in their country do evil. And
Okay. Are you going to read us what chapter 1 begins?
chapter 1.
Okay.
My first memory of early childhood is that of burning houses across from where we lived and people jumping out of 3- and 4-story buildings. Most of them did not survive the jump. At the time, it must have been 1939 or 1940, we lived in an apartment on the 4th floor. My father was drafted, and most of the time he was gone to fight the war. My sister and I slept in warm-up suits because there were air raid sirens every night.
Yes.
When we heard the sirens, we and the other tenants got up as quickly as we possibly could, grabbed our belongings, and raced down 4 flights of stairs into the basement like all the other tenants. My little suitcase contained my favorite doll, Peter. And Peter is still alive. He is now a senior citizen.
Wow.
I still have that doll.
You should have brought it here for show and tell.
Yeah.
Look at the camera when you can, so that your
My
audience is...
my mother had to carry more, including my sister, Moni, who was usually asleep, and even if she wasn't, was not able to walk fast down the 4 flights of stairs. I was always the first one down to the basement because I was terribly afraid. I often got up before the sirens went on because I could already hear the bombers approaching. In the basement, we each had a chair to sit on, but no water or food. Often we spent all night there until the sirens finally declared Entwarnung, all clear. Then all of us stumbled back up into our apartments. It was daylight by then, and the day had started. My mother caught some sleep, but she had to tend to day chores and prepare for more air raids during the day and the next night of bombings.
Let me ask something. In 1939, the U.S. was not involved in the war with these
England was.
English bombers?
Yeah,
Okay.
the U.S. was involved later.
Yes, 41.
Yeah, yeah,
Practically 42,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I just was curious because I
yeah.
knew.
I'm glad you brought that up,
Yeah,
yes.
that was the RAF, Royal Air Force. They had the sort of like the target thing was on their wings, I believe. Sort of like a bullseye.
Yes, yes, yes.
I don't know why I remember those crazy
Yes,
things.
Yes.
Go on. So it's very poignant, it's very dramatic that the noise of the bombs and the searing fire across the street from you, you can see this in the mind's eye as you read these words, and it's meaningful. Even if we weren't technically there, we can recount and empathize with you on that. And I guess that's one of the purposes of a good author, that she draws us in and engages us in your narrative. And the whole.
Thank you.
What did you learn? What kind of critiques did you get from our Thursday group about refining your manuscript?
Oh, all positive. And they were fascinated because they didn't know anything about it.
Right.
What I always hear is, well, we didn't know anything about that. We didn't know that.
Your ignorance is not bliss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What can we as Americans learn from these wartime tragedies to make us more proficient in preventing future wars? I know it's a big order from a short guy here, but
My answer always is education, education, education.
some craniums are real thick. They don't want to be educated. How do we deal with that?
I know. Less I shouldn't say that, but I say it anyway. Less sports and more education.
Well, okay. You want to tell us a little bit about the book on the Berlin airlift that you wrote, of that passage? Because that's another.
Yeah.
That's another part of your.
Yeah.
A lot of people do not, who were not alive then or were still young, do not realize that Berlin was cut off, choked by the Soviets surrounding them on 4 sides and trying to starve the Berliners to death.
Yes.
And that's a real gruesome era.
And the airlift started in June 1948 and ended May 1949. So, this is a story of an evolving friendship between former enemies. As with all lasting friendships, it took time to develop. Becoming friends for life requires trust.
Indeed.
Trust does not happen overnight. It requires setbacks, taking hurdles, and hard work. It is a process. In the case of the airlift, it took 11 months to create an everlasting friendship. It was a day-by-day, month-by-month experience for the Americans as well as for the Berliners, the outcome of which was uncertain, and the process daring and risky, and in some cases deadly. I feel blessed to have experienced that time firsthand at an age when I understood what was going on all around of us in Berlin. I was now 11 years old and never knew about a city that was not occupied or ruled by 4 allies. I was able to read the newspapers and listened to Rias Berlin, the broadcast in the American sector in Berlin. We Berliners lived on an island, surrounded by the Russians, within our respective sectors: the American, the British, the French, or the Russian sector. My family resided in the American sector. We traveled freely from one sector to the other until another type of war had to be fought, caused by the Russian blockade, as the Soviets tightened their control over service connections into Berlin and later also within the city. We became true islanders, and the time of the airlift began. We heard that Truman had to say, quote, "We are in Berlin by terms of an agreement, and the Russians have the right to get us out. The Russians have no right to get us out." End of quote. True and correct, but we know what the Russians could and could not do. They could care less about agreements. Meantime, for the first time since the bombing raids of the war, we heard the humming of airplanes at night. The airlift had begun and was on a 24-hour schedule. "Listen, listen, what do you hear? These are airplanes bringing food," I exclaimed while barging into my father's office. We ran upstairs to tell my mother and sister, who were sound asleep. "See, I told you," my mother said, "they won't leave us to the Russians." So these are really, really excerpts. And then the
Let me
most...
ask, Christel, do you think there's something that the current foreign policy experts in the State Department could learn in dealing with Russia on the Ukrainian crisis? It's a different kind of crunch, and although
Yeah.
it's not really totally surrounded, but
I really don't know. I think
There are pressure
we are
tactics.
not too well informed about this problem. I read German newspapers, but they always come a week later, so
Angela
I
Merkel
just don't have an
spoke with the
opinion on
president.
that. Yeah, I don't.
Well, let's hope that this ends peacefully. To me, it's one of the biggest crises since the Cuban Missile Crisis, in a sense.
Yeah, see,
But part of my ancestors from the Ukraine, so I have a feeling of affinity for that. But anyway, tell us a little bit more about how you get a book published. What do you have to do? What are the steps?
exactly what
Kanta said
what
in the earlier.
yeah, what was be said before.
Okay. Well, what was your experience? Did you have an agent?
No,
No.
I was my own.
You self-published. How was it publicized? Your books, other people.
I just showed them to people, and then
Go for it, man.
people told people, and my homeowners association, they put a little article in our homeowners newspaper.
You're in Kaiser.
Yeah, in Kaiser, and people just buy the book. They come by or they call, and then, yeah, a friend tells the friend, but I'm not frantic about it.
Okay. I mean, there's a
And people,
Roth's and Safeway and all the bulletin boards there, and in the laundromat you could put your little calling card there and say, "Come and get it, baby."
people at the gym are very interested at the courthouse.
Courthouse, okay.
Yeah, and I have friends in Portland and Lake Oswego, and so
So you use your network.
yeah.
Well, that's a good idea. Good start.
If you want to make money writing books, you better get a day job.
I agree. No, I still have a book in abeyance that I started writing in 1995 called Tales of a Tyke from Brooklyn, about 50 or 60 different vignettes, each about a page long, and it was some adventure I had as a child, as a young guy in Brooklyn, and what the life lesson it taught to me. So I still have high hopes of getting that published at some point. Free and Feisty is the subtitle. We'll see if it flies.
Many people go on Create Space, like
A website, is that? Or
Amazon Create Space.
okay.
Just type it in, and they will tell you. Yeah.
Good idea. Do you have anything else up your proverbial sleeve? Are you planning to write something new after the next year or so?
I'm still editing my third volume about the Berlin Wall, and that is, it's all written up, but it takes time because that is my biggest volume. And then I'm writing vignettes just to get away from these books.
Yes. You wrote some very clever and eye-opening things about how different words transliterate from German to English, and the funny juxtaposition. There's a fancy $1,000 word that they don't exactly mesh, and can you think of off the cuff any kind of word or expression that has a silly meaning in English or off the wall?
When I came to this country and went shopping, the clerk was very helpful because I couldn't find vinegar, and I didn't know the word for vinegar. So I described something and vinegar. So then I paid, and then the clerk said, "See you later." And I went outside with my daughter, and I said, "What does he mean, see you later? When and why? I don't even know this man."
He was muscling it in your life, man. Well.
Oh, there's more.
He was a poacher.
Yeah, I can't think of anything right now. I would have
That's a good one.
dig that out.
See you later, alligator.
No, I thought
happened.
he wanted a date or something.
Yeah. You got to watch out for those males. They're dangerous creatures, I hear.
Yeah.
They come from, okay. Yeah. I'd like to take a few minutes to explain what this show is all about, since it's a brand new series on CCTV, and I think some of our friends out there may have people to recommend as future guests. We're here to encourage people to do creative writing. It doesn't have to be their own life stories. It could be fiction. It could be poetry, to be published. And when they're published, it would be nice to share with this audience out there, you are friends in Salem and Kaiser, how this impacts you, and to introduce you to the world of literature from here in our own community. We're very prolific. The reason I have a butterfly symbol here is that writing is indeed the metamorphosis of the mind. We get things in a thought process. It changes us. We are impelled. We have a passion to put it on paper and soon it takes on a life of its own. As in real life, we correct our original copy. Sometimes there are things in life we'd love to do that we can't go back and correct, like you edit a manuscript. It'd be wonderful we could edit the manuscript of our life and just do a replay and delete the parts that we don't like anymore. But
Yeah.
it isn't so simple. What do you have to say to that, Christel? You've had some things in your life you'd like to push the delete button on, I bet.
Not really.
You've
No.
had all satisfactory.
No, the first 10 years of my life were the most fruitful, most formative ones. And what kept us alive
Yes.
was literature and music, music. And the love of my grandmother. So man doesn't live from bread alone.
Yes.
And that's what I learned.
Even if he proclaims to be well-bred, not always the case. Tell us a little bit about how music plays a part in your life, and has it created atmosphere? Do you listen to music when you do your writing? Does it sort of perform a backdrop for you a little bit?
Well, I have always played the piano. I started playing the piano when I was 5, and I always wanted to play the harpsichord.
Oh, wow.
I went to concerts with my grandmother at a very early age. I couldn't even write, no. And I would go home and would sit hours and hours at her grand piano and try to replay like Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, the second movement, and just get the harmonies. So, music has always been part of my life. Then later on, when I came to the United States, I rented a harpsichord. And then I went to Lewis and Clark College, and I got my master's degree in performance and music history.
I didn't know that.
And I played concerts in the Portland area for 10 years, practiced 8 hours a day. But then finally I realized I needed some money because I had 2 children in college. So I gave that up and started my school, the German Language Center. And finally I was able to make money.
Good.
But yes, I listen to music all the time. And if there's nothing on 91.9, I go over to 89.9 and listen to classical, all classical.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's Christel Wessel and whatever her name is. I like that station too. Music has also affected me, but I like classical as well. But having grown up in metropolitan New York, I've become a Broadway bug.
Oh, yeah.
And my obsession, if I can call it that, Broadway music.
Wonderful.
Broadway musicals, I have, the audience is not going to believe this, okay, I have only about 130 different videos, VCRs, on Broadway, and someday I want to start a group here of music appreciation on the lyrics and all that.
Yeah.
But it's time to say so long to our audience at home. Hope you feel you'll tune in on our next of the series, Our Awesome Authors. And I am B. Lee Coyne, your host, journalist for 50 years and sometime writer. And we'll see you soon. So take care and open up a new chapter of your life today. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.